Part 5, Everything Changes. 1 year after the broadcast that changed the galaxy, Earth looked different. Not physically, but in ways that mattered more. Cities buzzed with purpose. Scientists worked around the clock. Space installations that had been planned for decades were now being built in months. Humanity had woken up, and there was no going back to sleep. Taewon walked through the new Institute for Human Alien Engineering, the building still smelling of fresh paint and new equipment. The facility sprawled across 50 acres of what used to be empty desert, now transformed into a center where humans and aliens worked side by side. His desert, his home, changed like everything else. Students hurried past him in the corridors, some human, some not. A young woman argued with a Tauran engineer about power coupling efficiency. Tu Helene taught a class on quantum field theory to a room full of eager humans. In the workshop, someone was taking apart a Confederation medical device to understand how it worked, much to the horror of their alien supervisor. "You should not disassemble that," the alien was saying. "It took our species 2 centuries to perfect that design. But if we understand the parts, we can improve it," the human student replied. "Look, if we move this component here and replace this with a simple magnetic field generator..." The alien looked ready to faint. Taewon smiled and kept walking. He found Jiwon in the main engineering bay, covered in grease and looking happier than he'd ever seen her. She was working on a ship design, something that combined human and Confederation technology in new ways. Around her, a mixed team of engineers argued about specifications. "It won't work," a Halen engineer was saying. "The structural stress will tear the hull apart." "Not if we reinforce it here and here," Jiwon countered, marking points on the holographic blueprint. "And if we use this human alloy instead of your standard material, it's actually stronger. That alloy was developed for construction equipment." "Exactly. It's designed to take abuse. Our ships need to do the same." The Holland engineer looked at the design again, then slowly nodded. "I hate that this makes sense." Jiwon noticed Taewon and grinned. "Hey, boss. Come to check on the chaos?" "Just visiting," he said. "How's the project?" "Amazing. Terrible. Impossible. We'll have it flying in 3 months." She wiped her hands on a rag. "The first joint design ship built by humans and aliens working together. It's going to revolutionize everything, or explode spectacularly. That too, but we'll learn either way." That was the human approach summed up perfectly. Try, fail, learn, try again. The Confederation had spent millennia perfecting their technology through careful, methodical development. Humans looked at the same problems and asked, "What if we just try this crazy thing and see what happens?" Surprisingly often, the crazy thing worked. Taewon continued his walk, eventually reaching his office. It was a small room with a window overlooking the desert he loved. On his desk sat the original translator device from Vel's ship, now a historical artifact. Next to it was a photo of Dong Hyun, taken before the mission. Taewon touched the frame gently. "We did it," he said quietly. "Hope you're proud." A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. Vel entered, moving with the careful grace all Halland possessed. The alien had become a permanent fixture at the Institute, teaching and advising while also learning from humans. "The new students arrive tomorrow," Vel said. 50 humans, 20 aliens from 6 different species. The largest mixed class we've attempted. Nervous? Terrified. Vel's translator rendered it with perfect emotional nuance. Teaching humans is challenging. They question everything. They ignore protocols. They try things that should not work and then are surprised when they succeed. Sounds about right. "I am also excited," Vel admitted. "Watching your species work is never boring. Last week, one of your students tried to use a warp field generator to make coffee faster. Did it work? Surprisingly, yes. Also, it created a small temporal anomaly that we are still trying to understand. The coffee existed in 3 different time periods simultaneously." Taewon laughed. "I'll have a talk with them about experimental safety." "Please do." Vel moved to the window, looking out at the desert where they had first met. "I have been thinking about that night. When you found me, you could have left. Your life would have been simpler. We've had this conversation. I know, but I think about it often. One human mechanic made a choice to help and it changed everything. It makes me wonder about all the other small choices happening everywhere by everyone. How many other moments like that are occurring right now unnoticed?" "Probably a lot," Taewon said. "That's just life." You make choices, you help when you can, you hope it matters. Before Vel could respond, Taewon's phone rang. It was Soo Bin, now working as a systems specialist at the new Space Coordination Center. Turn on the news, she said without preamble. You need to see this. Taewon activated the wall display. Every major news network showed the same image, a massive ship in orbit larger than anything humanity had built. But it wasn't threatening. It was beautiful, covered in lights and symbols that identified it as a trade vessel. The first independent merchant ship to visit Earth, the news anchor was saying, carrying representatives from the Confederation's commercial sector, here to establish trade agreements and cultural exchanges. This marks the official beginning of Earth's integration into galactic commerce. Vel made a sound that the translator rendered as pleased surprise. They came. The moderates in the Confederation argued for this, but many species were resistant. They were afraid of what would happen if humanity gained full access to galactic resources. What changed their minds? You did. All of you. In the past year, humanity has proven that you can work with other species, that you can learn without destroying, that you can be trusted. Vel paused. Also, several species realized that if they did not trade with Earth, others would, and they would lose the economic advantage. That sounds more realistic. They watched as shuttles descended from the merchant ship, landing at designated sites around the world. Alien merchants emerged carrying samples and proposals. Within hours, agreements were being signed for technology exchange, cultural artifacts, and knowledge sharing. It was messy and chaotic and absolutely human. No grand ceremony, no formal protocols. Just people from different worlds trying to understand each other and make deals. Over the next few months, more ships came. Some brought traders. Others brought tourists, aliens curious to see the planet that had challenged the Confederation. A few brought scholars who wanted to study humanity's rapid advancement. And with them came problems. Cultural misunderstandings, economic disputes, incidents where human directness clashed with alien protocols. The integration was not smooth or easy, but it was happening. Taewon found himself called to mediate disputes more often than he liked. His role had evolved from teacher to ambassador without him really noticing. When a human construction crew accidentally offended a group of visiting aliens by modifying their designs without permission, Taewon explained that humans saw improvement as a compliment, not an insult. When a Confederation official complained that humans were reverse engineering technology too quickly, violating the spirit of the sharing agreements, Taewon pointed out that the agreements only restricted weapons development, not civilian technology. You gave us access to your databases, he said. Did you expect us not to read them? The galaxy was learning that humans didn't follow expected patterns. They were too adaptable, too creative, too willing to break rules that didn't make sense. It frustrated some and delighted others. 2 years after first contact, the first human-designed ship equipped with fully original FTL technology launched from Earth. It wasn't based on Confederation designs. Instead, human scientists had studied the principles, combined them with human engineering approaches, and created something new. The ship was less efficient than Confederation vessels. It was also faster, more maneuverable, and cost half as much to build. Within a year, several alien species were quietly asking about licensing the design. Taewon watched the launch from the Institute, surrounded by students and colleagues. Ji-won stood next to him, her eyes shining with pride. We built that, she said. Humans and aliens together, but that's a human design at its core. The Confederation must be having mixed feelings, Vel commented. They're terrified and impressed in equal measure, Ji-won said. I was in a meeting last week where a Confederation admiral called us delightfully terrifying. I'm taking that as a compliment. 5 years after first contact, Earth looked unrecognizable. The planet was connected to the galactic network. Human colonies existed on 3 nearby worlds. Mixed crews explored regions of space that the Confederation had deemed uninteresting or too dangerous. Human art, music, and culture spread across the galaxy. A human video game became popular among 6 different species. Despite none of them fully understanding the plot, human food, especially spicy dishes, became exotic delicacies that aliens either loved or hated with no middle ground. And humans, for their part, embraced the galaxy with enthusiasm that bordered on reckless. They learned alien languages, adopted alien customs, and formed friendships across species boundaries that sociologists were still trying to understand. Part 4. The quantum communication array hummed with power, filling the ancient outpost with a sound that Taewon felt in his bones. Vel worked at the controls with steady hands, uploading file after file of evidence. The holographic display showed the data spreading across the galaxy like ripples in a pond, reaching farther with each passing second. "It's working," Vel said. And Taewon heard genuine emotion in the translated voice. "The signal is strong. Within minutes, thousands of worlds will receive this information. Within an hour, millions." Jiwon stood next to Taewon, watching the display with wide eyes. "What happens now?" "Now we wait," Vel replied, "and hope that enough people believe what they see." They didn't have to wait long. The first responses came within 20 minutes. Text messages in dozens of languages appeared on the screen, translated by the outpost's systems. Scientists asking questions, politicians demanding verification, regular citizens expressing shock and anger. Then came the responses from other species. A Holland Science Council condemning the restriction policy, a species called the Tauren requesting emergency meetings. Others expressing support for the evidence, admitting they had suspected but never had proof. But not everyone was happy. Official Confederation channels flooded with denials and accusations. Vel was labeled a traitor. The data was called fabricated. Threats were made against anyone who spread the information. "They're scared," Vel observed. "Good, they should be." Taewon noticed something on one of the secondary displays. "Vel, what's that?" Vel checked the reading and went very still. "A ship, not Confederation. It's transmitting Halen dissident codes. Friends? I hope so." The ship arrived at the outpost an hour later, docking smoothly in a port that hadn't been used in centuries. 3 Halen emerged, their crystalline skin glowing with subtle colors. They embraced Vel with obvious relief, speaking rapidly in their own language before switching to translated speech for the humans' benefit. The leader, who introduced herself as Rena, looked at Taewon and Jiwon with open curiosity. "You are the humans who helped Vel?" "We are," Taewon confirmed. "Then you have our gratitude. What you've accomplished will echo across the galaxy for generations." Rena turned to Vel. "The dissident movement is growing. Your broadcast gave us the proof we needed. Already 3 species have withdrawn from Confederation military cooperation. More will follow." "And Earth?" Vel asked. Rena's expression grew complicated. "The Confederation has no choice now but to acknowledge humanity officially. They're preparing a diplomatic envoy as we speak. But there's more. The broadcast reached Earth too. Your governments know everything now." Taewon felt his stomach drop. "The whole world knows about aliens?" "The whole world knows about everything. The manipulation, the restriction policy, all of it." Rena showed them a display filled with Earth news feeds. Every major network was covering the story. Headlines screamed in every language. "World in shock, first contact confirmed, alien conspiracy revealed." "Oh no," Jiwon whispered. But as they watched the feeds, something unexpected began to happen. Instead of panic and chaos, humanity started to unite. World leaders scheduled emergency meetings. The United Nations called an unprecedented joint session. Scientists formed international teams to analyze the data. "They're not afraid," Vel said with surprise. "They're angry. Humans don't like being told what we can't do," Taewon said. "And we really don't like being lied to." Over the next 3 days while they remained in the outpost, the situation continued to develop. The Confederation sent an official envoy to Earth, led by a high-ranking official named Keth. The meeting was set to take place at the United Nations building in New York. "They want you there," Rena told Taewon and Jiwon. "Keth specifically requested the presence of the humans who made first contact." "Why us?" Jiwon asked. "Because you represent what the Confederation fears most. Humans who refuse to follow rules they don't agree with. Humans who helped a stranger without asking permission or expecting reward. Humans who took impossible technology and made it work with scrap and determination." Rena smiled. "You scare them. That gives you power." They traveled to New York on Rena's ship, a journey that took hours instead of days. Taewon watched Earth shrink and then grow again through the viewport, trying to process that he was leaving the planet for the first time. Jiwon spent most of the trip asking the Holland crew technical questions about the ship's systems, much to their amusement. Vel sat quietly, preparing for what was to come. "I am nervous," Vel admitted to Taewon. "What if this changes nothing?" What if the Confederation simply ignores the evidence? They can't ignore the entire galaxy, Taewon said. You made sure of that. Whatever happens now, it's already too late for them to go back to the old ways. The United Nations building was surrounded by military forces from a dozen countries. Security was intense but organized. Taewon, Jiwon, and Vel were escorted through corridors filled with world leaders, all of whom stared openly at the alien among them. The main chamber was packed. Representatives from every nation sat in tense silence. At the front of the room stood Keth, tall and imposing, with skin that seemed to shift colors slowly. Next to Keth stood human negotiators, looking small but determined. When Taewon and the others entered, every eye turned to them. Taewon felt the weight of history pressing down. This moment would be remembered forever. Keth spoke first, the words translated into every human language simultaneously. I come on behalf of the Confederation to acknowledge the situation that has developed. The information broadcast by the dissident Vel is accurate. Humanity has been observed and classified without your knowledge. This was done according to Confederation law. But we understand now that this law must be examined. A murmur ran through the chamber. The Secretary General of the United Nations stood to respond. The Confederation kept us ignorant and manipulated our development. How do you justify this? I do not, Keth said simply. That is why I'm here. The Confederation is not a single mind. We are many species with many views. Some of us have long argued that the restriction policy was wrong. The evidence Vel provided and the courage of these humans who helped has given us the power to change things. What kind of change? Demanded the American president. Immediate recognition of humanity as a sovereign species. An end to all covert operations on Earth. Technological assistance to accelerate your space program. And most importantly, an invitation to join the Confederation as probationary members. The chamber erupted in debate. Some leaders welcomed the offer. Others demanded more. Some wanted nothing to do with the Confederation at all. Taewon found himself called to speak. He stood awkwardly, very aware that billions of people were watching. I'm just a mechanic, he started. I fix broken things. When I found Vel, I saw something broken and I fixed it. That's what humans do. We see problems and we solve them. We see people who need help and we help them. Maybe that scares you. Maybe you think that makes us dangerous. But it also makes us valuable. We don't give up. We don't accept impossible. And we don't forget when someone tries to hold us back. He sat down to unexpected applause. Vel touched his arm gently. Well said. The negotiations continued for days. Taewon and Jiwon were interviewed by countless officials and journalists. They told their story over and over until the words felt mechanical. But through it all, they watched humanity adapt to its new reality with remarkable speed. Space programs that had been struggling received emergency funding. International cooperation reached levels not seen in decades. Scientists published papers about the Confederation technology at a rate that alarmed the alien observers. Your species learns fast, Rena commented. Too fast, some say. We have a lot of catching up to do, Jiwon replied. The final agreement was imperfect but hopeful. Humanity would receive basic FTL technology and access to Confederation databases. In return, humans would agree to certain restrictions on weapon development and would accept oversight during their expansion into space. It was a compromise that satisfied no one completely, which meant it was probably fair. During the signing ceremony, Keth approached Taewon privately. I want you to understand something, the Confederation official said. We did not restrict humanity out of cruelty. We did it out of fear. Every advanced species looks back at their primitive past with horror at what they were capable of. When we saw humanity, we saw that primitive violence combined with modern intelligence. We saw a species that could either save the galaxy or destroy it. And now, Taewon asked, now we will find out together. Perhaps we were wrong to fear. Perhaps you will prove that persistence and adaptability are more valuable than caution and control. Or perhaps... Keth trailed off. Perhaps we'll surprise you, Taewon finished. You already have. 6 months later, Taewon stood in the desert again, at the spot where he had first found Vel's ship. The crash site had been preserved as a monument. A simple plaque marked the location. Here, everything changed. Vel stood beside him, having chosen to remain on Earth as an ambassador and advisor. Their injuries had healed, leaving only faint scars on the crystalline skin. Do you regret it? Vel asked. Your life was simpler before. Part 3. Human Ingenuity. The morning of the 7th day brought strange signs. Birds fled from the area in massive flocks. Small electronics began malfunctioning for no reason. The air itself felt heavy, charged with invisible energy. Vel confirmed what Taiwan already suspected. The Confederation ships were preparing to act. We have perhaps 12 hours, Vel said, studying readings on the translator device. After that, they will fire. Everything within 5 miles will be vaporized. The team gathered in Taiwan's shop for a final meeting. Ji-won had barely slept in 3 days. Her hair tied back messily and her hands stained with grease. Subin sat with 3 laptops open, running simulations. Dong-hyun stood near the door, monitoring radio frequencies. Heejin checked Vel's injuries one last time while Kyung-min finished loading supplies. The ship will fly, Ji-won announced. It's not pretty and I wouldn't bet my life on it lasting more than 1 flight, but it will fly. That's all we need, Taewon said. 1 flight to the ocean. Then we're done. The coupling I built should hold at subsonic speeds, Ji-won continued. Any faster and the vibrations will tear the connections apart. We'll be flying low and slow. How low? Vel asked. Very low. Canyon level. We need to stay off radar as long as possible. Vel looked worried. The ship was designed for space, not atmospheric flight at those altitudes. The control systems will fight us. Then we fight back, Taewon said. I'll pilot. You handle navigation and defense. Ji-won stays in engineering to manage the power systems. I should stay here, Ji-won protested. You need someone to help with ground operations. No, Taewon said firmly. If something goes wrong with those connections, you're the only one who can fix them in flight. You're coming. She wanted to argue but knew he was right. Instead, she nodded and returned to her checklist. Dong-hyun approached Taewon privately. The evacuation is complete. Everyone's out. But those ships up there, they'll see the launch. Once you're in the air, they'll come after you. I know. I might be able to buy you some time. There's an old military installation about 20 miles from here. Experimental weapons testing site. Abandoned but not fully decommissioned. Including an EMP generator they deemed too unstable for deployment. Taewon understood immediately. You'll destroy the installation and disrupt their systems long enough for you to reach the water. Maybe. That's suicide, Dong-hyun. The older man shrugged. I'm 63 with bad knees and no family. You're trying to save the entire human race. Seems like a fair trade. I can't ask you to do that. You're not asking. I'm volunteering. Dong-hyun clapped him on the shoulder. Besides, someone has to teach these aliens that humans don't go down without a fight. There was no time to argue. They moved to the crash site as the sun climbed higher. The ship looked different now, covered in human technology like a patchwork quilt. Car batteries lined one wall. Wiring from a dozen different sources snaked through the corridors. The hull breach was sealed with industrial epoxy and metal plating from a truck bed. It was ugly. It shouldn't work. But it was the most beautiful thing Taiwan had ever seen, because it represented what humans did best. They adapted. They improvised. They refused to accept impossible. It looks terrible, Vel said, but there was something like admiration in the tone. It looks like hope, Taiwan replied. They boarded the ship. The interior was cramped with 3 people, made worse by all the added equipment. Ji-won squeezed into the engineering section, surrounded by jury-rigged systems. Vel took the navigation station. Taewon sat in the pilot's seat, which had been adjusted with cushions and straps to fit human proportions. The control interface was a nightmare. Vel had explained the basics, but half the systems didn't respond correctly because of the modifications. Taewon would be flying partially blind, relying on instinct as much as instrumentation. Power systems ready, Ji-won called out. Navigation online, Vel reported. I am detecting increased activity from the Confederation ships. They know we're here. Then let's not keep them waiting. Taewon activated the launch sequence. The ship shuddered and groaned. The hybrid engines made sounds that no engine should make, a screaming whine mixed with deep bass rumbles. The ground fell away as they lifted, and for a moment, everything seemed fine. Then the altitude control failed. They dropped 10 feet in a second, hit the ground hard enough to crack something important, bounced back into the air and started spinning. Alarm screamed in languages both human and alien. Taewon fought with the controls, trying to remember everything Vel had taught him while also ignoring it, because the ship wasn't responding the way it should. Power fluctuation in Sector 3, Jiwon yelled. Compensating. Vel's hands flew over the navigation panel. Taewon stopped trying to fly the ship correctly and started just trying to keep it in the air. He pushed when he should pull, cut power when logic said to increase it, and somehow it worked. They climbed, wobbling and shaking, but climbing. We're airborne, he announced. Barely. The Confederation ships are moving to intercept, Vel reported. Deploying drones. Through the viewport, Taewon saw them. Sleek, deadly machines dropping from the sky like hunting hawks. They moved with impossible speed and precision, closing the distance in seconds. Canyon, Taewon shouted, banking hard. The ship protested but responded, diving toward a massive canyon system. The walls rose around them, red rock towering hundreds of feet above. The drones followed. Vel activated the ship's defensive systems, which consisted of one working energy weapon and a lot of hope. The weapon fired. Bright pulses of blue light that struck one drone and sent it spiraling into the canyon wall. But there were more, many more. They're hurting us, Vel said. Pushing us into an optimal firing solution. Not if I don't let them. Taewon pushed the ship lower, so low that the landing struts almost scraped the canyon floor. He flew into a narrow side passage, barely wide enough for the ship. The drones, programmed for space combat, hesitated at the tight quarters. Two of them didn't hesitate long enough and crashed into the walls. Their flight algorithms are too rigid, Vel observed with surprise. They're optimized for efficiency, not adaptation. Good thing we're not efficient, Taewon muttered, pulling the ship into a vertical climb up a crack in the canyon wall. They emerged into open air, and immediately the remaining drones locked on. Taewon jinked left, then right, then did something no sane pilot would do. He cut all forward thrust and let the ship drop like a stone. The drones overshot, their targeting systems confused by the sudden change. In that moment of confusion, Vel destroyed 3 more with carefully aimed shots. Taewon, you're either brilliant or insane, Vel said. Both, Jiwon called from engineering. Definitely both. And we just lost power coupling 4. Can you fix it? Already on it. They raced across the desert, pursued by the remaining drones and tracked by the ships above. Taewon flew like no pilot had ever flown, making decisions based on gut feeling rather than training. He used the terrain, the limitations of the drones, and the ship's unexpected capabilities in ways that made Vel's translator struggle to find words. Then Dong-hyun made his move. The EMP blast lit up the sky like a miniature sun. Electromagnetic pulses rolled across the desert, killing every electronic system for miles. The Confederation ships' shields protected them from the worst of it, but their systems flickered and stuttered. The drones, smaller and less protected, simply fell from the sky. Taewon felt the ship's systems hiccup, but Jiwon had shielded the critical components. They stayed in the air. Dong-hyun, Taewon said quietly. He gave us our chance, Jiwon said, her voice tight. Let's not waste it. The ocean appeared on the horizon. Taewon pushed the ship faster, ignoring the protests from every system. Behind them, the Confederation ships recovered and gave chase, but they had lost precious time. Coordinates locked, Vel announced. Diving point ahead. The ship hit the water hard enough to knock them all against their restraints. Taewon fought to keep control as they plunged into darkness. The pressure increased with every second, the hull creaking ominously. Hull breach in Section 2, Jiwon reported. Seal it. I'm trying. Deeper and deeper they went. The darkness was absolute except for the blue glow of the ship's systems. Taewon felt the weight of the ocean pressing in, millions of tons of water trying to crush them. There, Vel pointed at the display. The outpost. It appeared in the ship's lights like a ghost from another age. Ancient architecture covered in centuries of ocean growth, but still intact, still functioning. Bioluminescent organisms clung to the walls, creating patterns of light that were almost welcoming. Taewon guided the ship to the docking port. The connection was rough, but it held. They had made it. For a moment, nobody spoke. They just sat in the damaged ship, breathing hard, barely believing they had survived. We did it, Jiwon said finally. We did, Vel agreed, thanks to human ingenuity and stubbornness. And a lot of luck, Taewon added. Perhaps, Vel said. Or perhaps your species makes its own luck. They exited the ship into the outpost. The interior was surprisingly well preserved, the technology ancient but still operational. Vel moved to the communication array with purpose. From here I can broadcast to the entire galaxy, Vel said. Every species will receive this data. The Confederation cannot suppress it all. Part 2, Secrets Unfold. 3 days passed before the alien woke up. Taiwan barely slept during that time, keeping watch and changing bandages every few hours. He had moved the being to a cot in the corner of his shop, surrounding the area with space heaters after noticing the alien seemed cold. The device from the ship sat nearby, its holographic display casting blue light across the walls. On the morning of the 4th day, Taiwan was checking the alien's wounds when its eyes opened. They were like nothing he had ever seen, multifaceted and deep, reflecting light in strange patterns. The being jerked upright with surprising speed and Taiwan stumbled backward. The alien's mouth opened, releasing sounds that were musical but incomprehensible. It looked around wildly, taking in the unfamiliar surroundings. Its hand reached for something at its belt, a weapon maybe, but found nothing. Taiwan had removed all the equipment while treating the wounds. "Easy," Taiwan said, raising his hands. "You're safe. I helped you." The alien stared at him, those strange eyes focusing with intensity. It reached for the device on the nearby table, the one Taiwan had taken from the ship. The moment its fingers touched it, the device activated more fully, scanning both of them with pulses of light. Then it spoke, and Taiwan understood. "You saved my life." The voice was still musical, but now the words made sense. The device was translating somehow. "Your ship crashed," Taiwan said carefully. "You were hurt. I brought you here." The alien looked down at its bandaged wounds, then back at Taiwan. "Why, your species has no contact protocols. No knowledge of other races. Why would you help?" "Because you needed help," Taiwan said simply. "What else would I do?" Something changed in the alien's expression. A subtle shift that might have been surprise. "I am Vel," it said. "I am Holland, and I am in great danger. As are you now." Over the next several hours, Vel explained. The Halin were an old race, one of the founding members of something called the Confederation. This confederation was a collection of over 40 different species, spread across the galaxy, maintaining peace through strict rules and hierarchies. Earth was already known to them. Humanity had been studied, classified, and judged. The verdict was not good. Vel stood with difficulty and activated the device more fully. Holographic images filled the air, showing star maps, documents in various languages, and images of different alien species. Taiwan watched, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. "Your species is listed as Tier 7 restricted," Vel said. The translator made the words sound formal, official. "This means no contact, no technology sharing, no interaction of any kind." "Why?" Taiwan asked. "What did we do wrong?" "You exist wrong according to the Confederation." Vel manipulated the hologram, bringing up what looked like a report. Even translated, the language was cold and clinical. "Humanity displays dangerous characteristics: extreme adaptability, irrational persistence, pack bonding that extends beyond species boundaries, a tendency to weaponize any available resource. The Confederation's assessment is that humans are too volatile to integrate safely." Taiwan felt anger rising in his chest. "So they just ignore us? Leave us alone?" "Worse." Vel's expression darkened. "They actively suppress your development. Satellite failures that seem like accidents. Political tensions that appear natural. Small interventions designed to keep humanity focused inward, fighting among yourselves, too busy to look outward." The hologram shifted, showing evidence, dates and events that matched real disasters, space program setbacks, international conflicts. Taiwan saw decades of human history in a new terrible light. And when a restricted species gets too close to deep space capability, Vel continued quietly, "The Confederation has protocols, permanent protocols." The meaning was clear without details. Taiwan felt sick. "I was part of a group within the Halen who believed this policy was wrong," Vel said. "We gathered evidence of the Confederation's manipulations, proof of what they've done to humanity and other species. I was carrying this data to a safe location when loyalists sabotaged my ship. I crashed here while trying to reach a hidden outpost." "What kind of outpost?" Taiwan asked. "An old Halen research station built centuries ago before the restriction policy. It's hidden in your ocean trenches, still functional. If I can reach it." I can use its communication systems to broadcast this evidence across the galaxy. Expose what the Confederation has been doing. Taiwan paced his shop, mind racing. They'll come looking for you. For your ship. Yes, recovery teams are likely already on their way. They will sterilize the crash site, erase all evidence. Standard procedure. Vel met his eyes. I am sorry I brought this danger to you. You should have left me there. No, Taiwan said firmly. I made my choice. Now we make a plan. Can your ship fly? The damage is extensive. With Hallan technology and resources, repairs would take weeks. Here, with primitive tools. Vel trailed off. Let me see. They drove to the crash site that night, Vel wrapped in a hooded coat that hid its features. The ship was as Taiwan remembered it, dark and alien against the sand. Vel showed him the damage while he examined it with a mechanic's eye. The main drive is destroyed, Vel explained. These secondary systems are damaged. Power flow is disrupted here and here. The hull breach must be sealed. It's impossible. Nothing's impossible, Taiwan muttered. It's just very difficult. He had learned that in the military. Every impossible problem had a solution if you were willing to think sideways. They returned to the shop as dawn broke. Taiwan was exhausted, but his mind was working. He needed help. Good help. G1 showed up at his shop that afternoon. She worked at the nearby solar installation. A smart woman in her late 20s who sometimes bought parts from him. She walked in without knocking and stopped dead when she saw Vel. Taiwan, she said slowly. Why is there an alien in your shop? He had been expecting her. G1 was observant, and he had been making unusual purchases from the solar farm's equipment storage. She would have noticed. It's complicated, he started. I can see that. G1 stepped closer, studying Vel with intense curiosity rather than fear. Is this real? Please tell me this is real. Vel tilted its head. I assure you I am quite real. Oh my God. G1's face split into a huge grin. This is incredible. Do you know what this means? That humanity has been lied to for decades and might be killed if we don't do something? Taiwan said. That sobered her. What? They explained everything. G1 listened, her expression cycling through disbelief, anger, and determination. When they finished, she was silent for a long moment. Okay, she said finally. So we need to fix an alien spaceship with Earth technology and get to an underwater base before recovery teams arrive and kill everyone. That's the situation? Essentially, Vel said. Then we better get started. G1 rolled up her sleeves. I know power systems. If we can figure out how your technology interfaces with ours, I can rig something. How much time do we have? A week at most, Vel said. Probably less. Then we work fast. Over the next 2 days, more people joined them. Taiwan called Dong Hyun, his old commanding officer, now retired and running a security company. Dong Hyun arrived skeptical and left a believer, immediately starting to plan evacuation procedures for the area. Haye Jin, the local doctor, came after Dong Hyun explained that they had an injured patient who needed care. She took one look at Vel, asked 3 questions, then started running medical tests with the calm efficiency of someone who had seen everything. Subin, a teenager who hung around the shop because she loved programming, figured out how to interface human computers with Vel's translator device. Within hours, she was reading Confederation code and swearing at its inefficiency. Kyung Min, a truck driver who delivered supplies to remote locations, volunteered to handle logistics and transportation. He didn't ask many questions, just nodded and started making lists. Vel watched all of this with growing confusion. This is not normal behavior, Vel said to Taiwan. Species don't cooperate like this. There should be hierarchy, approval processes, formal agreements. We don't really work that way, Taiwan said. Someone needs help, you help them. Pretty simple. The Confederation does not believe humans are capable of this kind of cooperation. Then they don't know us very well. They worked around the clock. Taiwan and G1 spent hours at the crash site, mapping the ship's systems, figuring out what could be salvaged and what needed to be replaced. Vel provided technical knowledge, but it was human ingenuity that found solutions. When Vel said the power coupling was impossible to repair without specialized equipment, G1 built one from solar panel components and wire from a car alternator. When the navigation system refused to interface with Earth's magnetic field, Subin rewrote the code using principles from smartphone GPS systems. It was messy, improvised, and barely functional. Vel watched their work with a mixture of horror and fascination. "This should not work," Vel kept saying. "But it does," Taewon replied. On the 6th day, sensors picked up anomalies in high orbit. The Confederation ships were arriving. Donghyun activated his evacuation plan, spreading word of a chemical spill drill. People grumbled but complied, leaving the area in organized groups. Part 1. The Discovery. The desert stretched endlessly under the afternoon sun, waves of heat rising from the sand like invisible ghosts. Taewon wiped the sweat from his forehead and checked his GPS again. The old research station should be just over the next ridge, abandoned for 3 years but still full of salvageable parts. He needed a specific type of servo motor for a client's drone, and buying new wasn't an option when used parts worked just fine. His truck bounced over the rough terrain, kicking up clouds of dust behind it. Taewon had made this kind of trip dozens of times. The desert was full of forgotten places, left behind when funding dried up or projects failed. For a mechanic like him, it was a treasure hunt. Most people thought he was crazy for living out here on the edge of nowhere, but Taewon preferred it that way. Fewer people meant fewer questions, fewer complications. The research station came into view, a cluster of prefabricated buildings half buried in sand. Taewon parked his truck and grabbed his toolbox. The sun was already starting to sink toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. He had maybe 2 hours of good light left. He was inside the main building, carefully removing components from an old weather monitoring system, when he heard it. A sound like thunder, but wrong. Thunder came from clouds and the sky was clear. Taewon stepped outside and looked up. A streak of light blazed across the sky, moving impossibly fast. At first he thought it was a meteor, but meteors didn't change direction. This thing was definitely maneuvering, trying to control its descent. Taewon watched as it disappeared behind a distant ridge, followed seconds later by a flash of light and a deep rumbling boom that he felt in his chest. He should leave. Should get in his truck and drive back to his shop. Whatever that was, it meant trouble. Military testing maybe, or a crashed satellite. Either way, people would come looking, and they wouldn't be happy to find civilians poking around. But Taewon had spent 10 years as a military engineer before his discharge. He knew what military aircraft looked like when they crashed, knew the sound they made. This was different. His curiosity pulled at him like a physical force. Just a quick look, he told himself. Just to see. The drive to the crash site took 20 minutes, navigating carefully around rocks and dry ravines. As he got closer, Taewon felt a strange tingling sensation on his skin, like static electricity. The air itself seemed to hum with energy. He crested a small hill and stopped the truck. Below him, half buried in a crater of fused sand and scorched rock, was something impossible. The craft was sleek and black, its surface so smooth it seemed to drink in the light rather than reflect it. It was roughly the size of a small airplane, but there were no wings, no visible engines, no markings of any kind. The shape was organic, almost alive, like something grown rather than built. Taewon sat in his truck for a full minute, just staring. His engineer's mind tried to make sense of what he was seeing, tried to fit it into categories he understood. It refused to fit. This wasn't human technology. This wasn't anything from Earth. He grabbed a flashlight and climbed out of the truck on shaking legs. The setting sun cast long shadows across the desert and the temperature was already dropping. He approached the craft slowly, half expecting it to explode or take off. Up close he could see the damage. A long gash ran along one side, exposing interior components that glowed with a soft blue light. The metal, if it was metal, was seamless. No rivets, no welds, no joints. A hatch on the side was partially open, twisted by the impact. Taewon shined his flashlight inside. The corridor beyond was small, barely tall enough for him to stand upright. The walls were covered in symbols that seemed to shift and flow when he looked directly at them. The air that escaped smelled metallic and strange, but breathable. Every logical part of Taewon's brain screamed at him to leave, to call someone, to do anything except climb inside an alien spacecraft. But he had learned long ago that logic and curiosity didn't always agree. He squeezed through the hatch. The interior was dark except for the blue glow coming from various panels. Taewon moved carefully, running his hand along the wall. The surface was warm to the touch and had a texture like polished stone. He followed the corridor deeper into the ship until it opened into a larger chamber. The pilot was lying on the floor. Taewon froze, his heart hammering. The being was humanoid in basic shape, with 2 arms and 2 legs, but that was where the similarity ended. Its skin had a crystalline quality, refracting the blue light into rainbow patterns. 4-fingered hands lay motionless at its sides. The face was elongated with features that seemed both ancient and refined, like a statue carved by a master sculptor. It wasn't moving. Taewon knelt down carefully, looking for signs of life. There was no visible breathing, but when he held his hand near the being's chest, he felt warmth. Something on its wrist was blinking, a small device that pulsed with red light. A medical monitor maybe, or a distress beacon. He had to make a choice. He could leave right now, drive back to his shop and pretend he never saw any of this. Authorities would eventually find the crash site. They would take everything, classify it all, and Taewon would never know what happened. Or he could help. The decision surprised him with its simplicity. He was a mechanic. He fixed broken things. This being was broken, and so was its ship. Taewon stood up and explored the rest of the ship quickly. He found what looked like a control room, with displays that showed information in that same flowing script. One panel was blinking insistently, showing what was clearly a warning of some kind. The ship's power was failing. He spent the next hour working by flashlight, using his basic understanding of electrical systems to trace the ship's power flow. The technology was far beyond anything he had ever seen, but energy was energy. Power had to flow from source to destination. He managed to reroute some functions, shutting down non-essential systems to preserve what remained of the ship's power core. By the time he finished, it was fully dark outside. Taewon made a decision. He couldn't leave the being here, and he couldn't move the ship. But his shop was equipped to handle heavy machinery, and he had medical supplies from his military days. Using his truck's winch and every strap he owned, Taewon carefully loaded the unconscious alien into his truck bed, covering it with a tarp. He worked fast, constantly checking the dark sky for lights that might mean someone else had seen the crash. Before he left, he returned to the ship one last time. In the control room, he found a small device that had detached during the crash. It was roughly rectangular, covered in those shifting symbols. When he picked it up, it activated, projecting a holographic display into the air. Taewon couldn't read the symbols, but he recognized data when he saw it. This was some kind of storage device. He took it. The drive back to his shop was the longest hour of Taewon's life. Every set of headlights made his pulse spike. Every shadow looked like a helicopter, but the desert was empty. He made it home without seeing another vehicle. His shop was a converted garage on 5 acres of nothing, surrounded by broken-down cars and equipment. Taewon backed the truck into the main bay and closed the door. Under the harsh LED lights, the alien looked even more unreal. He set up a makeshift medical area, using clean tarps and his emergency medical kit. The being's injuries were obvious now. Burns along one side, a deep cut on the leg, and signs of internal trauma. Taewon did what he could, cleaning wounds and applying pressure bandages where he saw bleeding. The device he had taken from the ship sat on his workbench, still displaying its holographic information. Taewon stared at it, then at the unconscious alien, then at his own shaking hands. Everything had changed. He didn't know what the data contained, didn't know if the being would survive, didn't know what would happen when someone came looking for the ship. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. The universe was bigger than anyone on Earth realized, and Taewon had just become the first person to know it for sure. He pulled up a chair next to the alien and settled in to wait. Outside, the desert was silent under a sky full of stars. Somewhere up there, among those distant lights, was the being's home, and somewhere closer, moving through the darkness, might be others looking for their missing pilot. Taewon checked the alien's pulse one more time, feeling the steady rhythm under his fingers. Alive. They were both alive. At least for now, that would have to be enough.